Hey folks, welcome back to the Dark Age podcast. All right, Dark Horse. But nonetheless, here we are. It's Q&A time, and we got the Qs in the queue. We do. Yeah.
We got just sort of endless tech problems here. So I did not have the questions from the Discord until just now, and not on them at all, on the stuff going on here. But now that I have them, I also have the little thing that I wanted to say at the top of the first hour, which I will say next week as well. But let me say this with regard to the Discord community that I talked about a little bit at the end of that last hour that we just did, hour and a half, 2 hours, something. Join your fellow patrons on our Discord server where you can engage in honest conversations about difficult topics, join a book club, or unwind with virtual happy hours and even karaoke. Young or old, left or right, there's a spot for you at the campfire. And some of the Discord leaders shared some of the stats about it. It's almost 2 years old, and they've had 95 happy hours and social
95
and
happy
a lot
hours.
of lectures and book clubs and essay clubs and poetry nights and short story readings. All sorts of great stuff goes on in the Discord. So I will say that at the top of the hour next time, whereas right now it's much smaller audience for the Q&A, of course. But
so there is also a certain amount of meeting in person, despite the immense hazard of social awkwardness that can arise when face to face. But nonetheless, all kinds of things are happening in this community. It's very exciting.
Yeah, it is. It is. So one of the things that I say to the Discord people every week is vote on a question, and we will start off the Q&A with a question from you guys each week. They had a tie this week. I'm just going to read the top one, and then we're going to go into the questions that have come in, and then if we have time at the end, I'll come back to their second one. Okay. Elephants have a tuskless gene, and I don't know anything about this, so I'm just reading it as it's written, and it may be that neither of us knows what to do with it, so we go to the next question right now. Elephants have a tuskless gene on the X chromosome that is dominant. There are no males without tusks. Male embryos with the gene are apparently aborted. Tuskless females have half as many male children.
Okay. Tuskless females have half as many male children.
Which makes sense. Right, because they're giving one of their X's to each of their male children, and half the time that's going to be a tuskless male who apparently are aborted in utero.
Okay.
If it's this clean, like very little in genetics is this clean, but but take the story at face value in terms of how it's being presented to us. I'll start from the beginning. Elephants have a tuskless gene on the X chromosome that is dominant. There are no males without tusks. Male embryos with the gene are apparently aborted. Tuskless females have half as many male children. And what's not said here is possibly if you're homozygous for the tuskless gene as a female, you couldn't be as a male because you wouldn't have two X's. But if you're homozygous as a female, that may cause. My guess is that that's even more costly for females. Although maybe that's not the case. But if tuskless females have half as many male children, if they were homozygous for the tusklessness, they would have 0 male children. So presumably heterozygous for this condition renders you lower fitness for if you're a female, but not no fitness, where if you're homozygous, you basically can't bear male children. Apparently, and this is where I just don't even know what to make of this, apparently a similar gene has been observed in humans. I have no clue how this could work or how it would evolve. Can you explain? So I don't know if we can do anything with that because I don't know what that means.
Boy, I want 5 minutes to sit quietly in a room by myself with a piece of paper and think this through. But
I also, this is one of the differences between you and me. I want to see a well-written paper by someone who knows what science is talking about this, so that I can get a sense of what in this story is actually as clean as it would appear, and what is interpretation of sort of muddy evidence, and what does it even mean? So that the big black box in the question for me is apparently a similar gene has been observed in humans. What does similar mean here? I have no idea what similar, similar in what way? Similar in that when a male has so there's something on the X that when a male has, he doesn't survive gestation, but when a female has it, she seems to do okay, but any male child that she gives it to doesn't survive gestation. Is that all that is meant here by similar, or is there something more? It's obviously not actually about tusks, but
yeah. I mean, I still want my 5 minutes in a room by myself with a piece of paper.
Yeah.
But there's something in this that isn't adding up to me yet. And I have a feeling if I was to go through it in detail, I would get it. But first of all, I'd like to know something about the distribution of tusks in elephants, right? Apparently all the males have it. And this story suggests some females do and some females don't.
Well, and the story would suggest that those females who don't entirely due to the presence of this allele. And that may or may not be true as well.
If females are homozygous for the tuskless allele, they cannot give birth to male children?
Well, I'm inferring that from tuskless females have half as many male children. For me, the clean genetics that are implied by the rest of the question are, that means that those tuskless females are heterozygous. They have two X's. One of them has the tuskless allele. One of them has the normal tusked allele, whatever it is. And any of their male children who end up with the X that has the tuskless on it don't end up...
they are aborted.
They're aborted.
I get it. What doesn't add up to me is that it seems like the story should therefore be that homozygous dominant females never produce male children.
What does homozygous dominant mean?
If the tuskless gene is dominant,
okay,
a homozygous female can exist. She will have no tusks, and she will also not carry a recessive tusk chromosome.
She presumably will have no male children.
She cannot have male children. That strikes me as the kind of fact that we would be likely to know. I mean, maybe it was just discovered. But so something about this story isn't quite adding up.
It's so extraordinary.
It's a pretty extraordinary case that it would have to be pretty new for us not to run across it, because it's such a good example of so many genetic concepts you might wish to teach, for example. So here's what I'm wondering. Are we dealing in this question with a meiotic drive, which is counterproductive to the elephants that carry the driving element? It would have to be.
This is a selfish gene.
Right.
Yeah.
Or is this a case of an adaptation of some kind in which tusk variation in females has some meaning, and it's
those
never
who are heterozygous,
males.
the females who are heterozygous for it are more resistant to elephant pox.
Right. So this sounds, the fact of male offspring of females who have passed on their tuskless allele are aborted. Sounds like this is a meiotic drive question, an ultra-selfish genetic element.
What's that logical connection?
Because it would be bad for your fitness if you produced embryos of
So meiotic drive is just your stand-in for non-adaptive.
So let me
meiotic drive is the category that you are using for all of the things that might be non-adaptive.
A gene is sabotaging the fitness of the individual to increase its own narrow fitness. It has basically rebelled against the rest of the genome. So let me spell this out. So there's a very famous case of this called the T haplotype in mice. T haplotype results in a short tail. That's why it's called T haplotype. And the basic point is...
Wait, what?
T for tail.
Okay. I didn't actually know that part.
Right. So the point is, you've got two chromosomes that carry the same type of information, but they don't carry the identical information. So the two different versions of the gene are called alleles. The T haplotype allele is a saboteur of the individual that carries it. If you have two copies of it, you're dead, right? You don't survive to reproduce. If you have only one copy of it, then that one copy is in a predicament that is true at any gene locus in which you have two different alleles, where since each allele would love to get into the future, it would love to do so by excluding its competitor allele on the other chromosome, but in general, genes don't. In general, genes put up with each other, and there's a 50-50 chance that any given sperm or egg will carry a given allele in which you're heterozygous. So the point here is, in the case of the T haplotype results in the destruction of all gametes that don't carry it. I think this is in males that this happens. So sperm that carry the alternative, the normal allele, don't make it. So the only sperm that the mouse produces have this special gene, which means that in competition with other male mice, in sperm competition, the individual who carries the T haplotype is hobbled because they're producing half as many sperm as they might, which reduces their chances of winning in sperm competition by 50%. So it is bad for the fitness of the individual who carries this thing, but the degree to which that individual is hobbled in reproduction is more than compensated for from the point of this allele by virtue of the fact that if that individual successfully reproduces, it will definitely pass on that version of the gene, right? So it's bad for the individual. The gene has rebelled against the rest of the genome to its own advantage, right? It's doubly likely to be passed on rather than a 50-50 shot. It's 100% of all offspring will carry it, but the likelihood of producing offspring is reduced spectacularly. So in the case of elephants, I don't know that any of the story we've just heard is true, but I assume that it must line up with something. The idea that a female elephant is going to produce a male embryo that will then be aborted, right? Elephants do not produce large litters, right? I think they always produce singletons.
And I think they may have the longest gestation on the planet. So like presumably this would be super early, but that's.
But nonetheless,
and they're seasonal breeders. So like that's actually a big. I think they're seasonal breeders. So
right.
It's at least, it's only once every. Anyway, that's a huge cost.
So even if we rewrite the story so that embryos are aborted very early.
And maybe they have a chance at reproduction still that season.
Right. The number of times a female will miss a season in which she's well equipped to reproduce and then she dies and doesn't get another shot is going to be large. So the cost of this thing is high. So what that says is either selection has screwed up, which happens. Sometimes there are problems that can't be solved elegantly. But more likely, this sounds like a case in which there's conflict within the genome that is being that is resolved in a messy and costly way. So anyway, that's the question, because the whole meaning of this scenario is different. If this is adaptive but sloppy, okay. If this is maladaptive but represents a selfish genetic element producing this phenomenon, that's a whole different story.
Yeah, and then we're at a levels of selection analysis, like, oh, actually, it's not always the genes, it's not always the individuals, it's not it's not always that one part of the thing that you can categorize with boundaries around it is the thing that selection is under. It's like it is always both and.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Where have the questions gone to? There we go. Oh, this is the first question from DarkHorseSubmissions.com, where you too can ask questions right now, should you choose to. We have, I live in Canada, and if I'd like to start a new job, I don't have the option to remain unvaccinated. Novavax seems like a reasonable compromise. What are your thoughts?
I keep forgetting to look into Novavax. I did it a long time ago. My recollection was that it is still spike-based, that it lacks some of the troubling phenomena, lipid nanoparticles, for example.
Yeah.
But I don't remember that in detail, and I don't want to guess at this.
Yeah. No, I feel exactly the same way. I looked at it too long ago at the point that we didn't know as much as we do now. But that, at a gross level, it would seem that if we've got Novavax, which is a traditional platform, protein, I can't even remember exactly. But let's call Novavax. If you've got Novavax and DNA or adenovirus vectored, which is J&J or AstraZeneca, I think as well, or the mRNA vaccines, which is Pfizer and Moderna, if there's like these three types. That the mRNA vaccines seem to be, from what the evidence that we are allowed to see suggests, the most likely to do you harm. And
what we learned from Christine Ben, who we talked about her interview on Unheard some weeks back.
Okay, yes.
The mRNA, according to her analysis...
She's a European scientist and biostatistician, even, maybe.
Yeah, I think she's Dutch, but
that's European.
Oh, totally. Yeah, absolutely.
Just trying not to be wrong by going too precise.
Right. But anyway, her analysis, she's partnered with some other authors on it, but the analysis suggested that the mRNA vaccines, that is to say, the lipid nanoparticle vaccines, appear to be net negative in terms of all-cause mortality, more harm than good.
Yep.
The adenovirus vectored vaccines appeared to be slightly positive with respect to all-cause mortality, and interestingly,
and they didn't look at whatever Novavax is, right?
As far as I know.
Platform.
So the interesting thing was not all of the benefit of the vectored vaccine came in the form of COVID reduction.
That's right.
So there was a question about
right,
non-specific immunity being amplified by it. Now, I would still caution you
Yep.
that analysis is done very shortly after these vaccines have been deployed for the first time ever. What that means, it does not mean that the adenovectored vaccine is actually beneficial. What it means is that if the analysis is right early in this process, where we see the costs and benefits at a year and a half in, it appears to be beneficial. That could easily reverse if there are harms that show up 2 years, 5 years out. That analysis could reverse. So. If it were me, I would certainly want the adenovectored one, and
over mRNA,
over the mRNA one by far.
But neither of us know enough about
the Novavax,
to say. But of those three types, the only thing, again, as I said, the only thing that is clear to me is that the mRNA vaccines are the least good option. The
least good option. I would also say another thing that is clear, I think, is that spike protein is a very dangerous focus. The production of spike protein or the introduction of spike protein into the body is not a cost-free thing.
Yeah, which is to say, therefore, that the vaccines that provide it to you or cause your body to produce it, or being exposed to COVID itself, are all not a safe activity. And that means that we all live on this planet where this virus was created and escaped, and here we are, and pretty much all of us are going to end up exposed to it somehow at some point, but we all ought to be looking to minimize that.
All right, so I just realized something. We have been talking a little bit about the stabilization of the mRNAs in the lipid nanoparticle vectored vaccines, that the substitution of pseudouridine for the standard uracil stabilizes these things, which is bad.
So that it persists. Whereas it would not. It would be expected to get dismantled by other
normal processes that take apart mRNAs.
The mRNAs is, I never know how to pronounce that, but yeah.
I think you got it. That will not be a feature of the adenovectored, because their mRNA will be downstream of a DNA. So there will be presumably no pseudouridine. So that means...
Oh, I see. I see what you're saying. Won't be the case. There will have been no ability to affect what the mRNA itself looks like, because the mRNA is not the thing either being injected or being directly produced.
Right. Now, what I don't know is that I cannot say for certain that there is no similar phenomenon with respect to DNA, but I think the way the adenovectored vaccine works should preclude this, so that in effect, one of the things that may be a cause of the measurable distinction between these two technologies is,
I don't know,
that the information molecule is natural. Is natural in its chemical construction, and therefore dealt with elegantly by the body, and therefore not persistent in a way that can cause pathology over the course of many months.
I haven't looked into it, and I'd never heard of pseudouridine. So I don't know if we even produce it.
I believe the answer is we do. We biologists don't understand the logic of the body, the rare cases in which this is actually utilized in a normal process. It has to do apparently with stabilization. But I think what has occurred is that the manufacturers of the vaccine used it liberally in the molecule they produced, whereas the body knows when, knows in the evolutionary sense,
Sure.
when to utilize it to get a particular effect. Mm-hmm. And
but so it's not like there's a whole bunch of it and a whole bunch of it already. It's like, oh, there's just a bunch of uracils and a bunch of pseudouridians floating around, and so like, why not grab one or the other? It's like, no, it's really always the uracil that gets that gets used in RNA.
I think so. I should ask Robert Malone about this, but my impression from what he was saying about this is that basically we took a process that does exist biologically but is very sparingly used and employed it technologically in a way that changed this radically.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
What could go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong?
Next question. Evolutionarily speaking, how has the brain changed now that we allow blind people and people with disabilities to reign in our tribes? And this person has spelled reign as if it's precipitation, but I'm sure they mean to sort of to lead in places. People like me with lifelong myopia who are yet allowed to persist and
well.
Reign in some cases.
Yeah. I mean, it really depends what the question means, right? There is a way in which people who would be so hobbled by a disability are technologically rendered equal or close. Mm-hmm. And so they stick around, and presumably that has a neurodiversity benefit, which is that people who have different strengths and weaknesses contribute something to our breadth of thought. Great. Now, in your case...
And the population is so large that, of course, there are lots of outliers that we can point to, people like Stephen Hawking, right, who wouldn't have survived if he'd been born, really almost any earlier than he was actually born. And, of course, we all benefit from his thinking.
Right. So there are people that we save. There are people, there's a great case with post-encephalitic babies. These are babies who have a circulation issue that causes water to accumulate and drive out brain matter, which would have always been fatal in the past. We've gotten good at surgically reversing it. But the crazy thing is how frequently somebody who has had profound damage to the brain very early in development ends up normal in some way that is ridiculously neurodiverse, right? Like you destroy the back of the brain by water accumulating there, that ought to make you blind because that's where the visual cortex goes. But the visual cortex will then form somewhere else, which tells you so many interesting things. Yeah. One thing it tells you is that there's no thing in the genes that says place visual cortex in the back of the brain, because there's no way a contingency plan could have evolved, since nobody would have survived that damage in the ancestral past.
I thought what that told you is that we only use 10% of our brains.
You only use 10%. No.
I only use 10% of your brain.
Oh, that's about right. But so the point is, those people have unusual kinds of neurological structures that have presumably impact. No doubt there are deficits. If you could get rid of a large amount of your brain,
hence the absurdity of this trope that I actually haven't heard in a while, but we used to hear all the time, like, we only use 10% of our brains. No, selection doesn't work that way.
Selection doesn't work that way.
It's incredibly expensive to build and to run, the brain is. So.
But no doubt if we were to measure some of these people who have lost a lot of brain matter but very early in development and then end up seeming normal, there would be a deficit somewhere. It's got to be.
Yeah.
But anyway,
you were going to, before I interrupted you, you were going to say something about in my case.
In your case, I don't believe that you have I don't believe that we have evidence that you have a genetic predisposition to cruddy eyesight.
Even though both of my parents have myopia?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I think this is developmental. And I think this is one of the things that we learn.
Oh, you blame the library.
Yes.
You blame the library in my home that I grew up with, the walls lined with books.
I blame the price of ink and paper, which caused small fonts, which caused people to bury their noses in books.
And the cultural value placed in my home on taking yet another book down off the wall and reading it for long hours at a time.
Right, especially early in development, where the feedbacks that might cause your eyes to correct if you were, hunting, gathering, whatever else you might have been doing, didn't work out. And so I think that a huge fraction of the pathology which we dismiss as, errors in the genes. It's just, it doesn't make any sense that it could be, right? Those errors wouldn't accumulate so quickly. They wouldn't be so widespread. And so basically the analysis that we would do for something like the widespread and growing need for orthodontia in children is the result of a bad feedback where we disrupted development. Likewise, I think the same thing will be true for eyes and much else. Mm-hmm. But anyway, what's the net outcome? Probably we get some neurodiversity benefit. It is certainly true that to the extent that genetic anomalies show up that are bad and we technologically correct for it, right, or behaviorally correct for it, that will result in those anomalies not being selected against, and so they will accumulate. That will have an impact. Mm-hmm. But I don't think most of the kid pathologies are really about that. I think that's just nonsense.
Interesting. Okay. Next question. If memetic transmission is in some way like genetic transmission, is there a corollary with GMOs, CRISPR, or something else that could help us interpret what's going on with our culture as related to the interference of tech and media?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm still processing the question. So
TikTok is like broccoli that's been dipped in pesticide. There's lots of bad cultural stuff that, especially when it's been made super delicious by people who make money for your consuming it, gets ingested in large amounts and it spreads. But let's look at the difference between the genes and the memescape, so that you know the baseline. Both genes and memes are hereditary modes. They are both vitally important in human beings. Human beings are very special in the degree to which things have been shifted over into cultural evolution space rather than gene space. But the key thing is they both evolve. Adaptation happens in both realms. The adaptations that happen in cultural space are actually there to serve the genes. Sorry, that's bad news, but it's true. It has to logically be true for reasons we've gone into in our book and have gone into on DarkHorse too. But the key thing is the mutation rate over in culture space is incredibly high. The rate of extinction of mutants is also incredibly high. So the point is, if you look horizontally across culture and you say, well, are you claiming that all of this is adaptive? No, huge amount of it's garbage, but it's also not durable. Mm-hmm. It's not going to last. If we look into the genes and, your genes produce an appendix, we can be pretty sure that appendix is serving your interests in some way. And if we can't spell out what that way is, we know we have something to look for. You can't really say that with cultural traditions that are only available in the present. Something has to last a long time before you're justified in saying, actually, that's somehow serving the interests of the creatures that have it. And so, yeah, there's a lot of garbage. And especially now the market is doing things to our cultural space. Basically, it's preserving a lot of garbage because wealth is being transferred from you to somebody else. And it's in their interest to keep you confused.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. Hello from New Zealand. The 2019 gun confiscation here was 20% effective at best. Since then, gun crime is through the roof and police struggle to recruit. Be wary of the US media using New Zealand as an example.
Yes, I think I've heard this about Australia. I've heard part of it about Australia too, that the gun, I think it was not a buyback in Australia, but there was an attempt to reduce the number of guns in circulation, and it was not nearly so effective as we are told.
Okay. I'm going to get some dust in my throat, so I'm going to ask you a question.
And then you're going to skedaddle?
Yeah, I just got to get some more water.
Do you want to storm off as if I've said something offensive?
No.
All right, then.
Since hearing Eric describe how important Warren Zevon is, I've become a huge fan. Do you each have one or two musical artists or groups that have grabbed you like Warren has Eric? Yeah, there are a number, but I think my
my interaction with music was changed very positively by Pandora. And what I mean by that is I was sort of stuck in a rut where I was listening to the same stuff I listened in high school, and it wasn't that provocative or interesting to me anymore. So I was kind of in a less musical phase because I didn't know what to listen to. All of which is very unnatural, in ancestral circumstances. Music is a living phenomenon where even if you're listening to the same musicians, or more likely you're participating in the production of music, and it's a limited repertoire of songs, every song changes every time. And so it's a very different relationship to music, right? We have a very novel relationship where where a song can be identically reproduced 2 times in a row, by playing the MP3 file or whatever it is. But so anyway, I was in a musical rut. Pandora, which I'm pretty convinced doesn't do what they say it does, right? In theory, what Pandora is supposed to do is people who know music are supposed to describe the attributes of a particular song, and then it is supposed to use that information to find other things you're likely to like based on what you have liked in the past. I don't think that's really what it does. I think what it does is it simply takes people, if you have liked 45 songs on Pandora, then you can predict based on who else has liked a large fraction of those songs what thing you haven't heard you might like, right? So anyway, it did that for me. And it found a bunch of things.
What did that for you?
Pandora.
Okay.
It found a bunch of things that I probably would never have encountered on my own because I was stuck in this musical rut that do mean a lot to me, that have important influence. So, there are various bands that mean something to me that I probably wouldn't have, maybe I would have encountered Radiohead and I would have figured out that there was something there that was important to me, but maybe not. Definitely Spoon. I find, especially lyrically, the Arctic Monkeys are often quite insightful. Cage the Elephant is something I probably would not have found. It's got exactly the right Gen X ethos, I think, the right sensibility. So all of those are very significant. I don't know that it mirrors Eric's relationship with Warren Zevon, but Eric is also quite the musician, and I just definitely am not. I really like music. I have a deep relationship with music, but I'm frustrated that the only thing I can do is sing. So
now you've done it.
Now I have, in fact, done it. Right. But I did it in prose, so.
No, I mean, you're going to get asked to sing.
Right. Right, which I will carefully skirt that invitation. But anyway, I don't know that my relationship would be the same as Eric's would be by virtue of the fact that he has, he produces music and has taught himself multiple instruments and all of that. But there are these few artists that are especially resonant for me, and I'm glad as an adult to have found that stuff.
Nice. I'm going to not answer the question now, not because I don't want to, but because it's the kind of question that I like and I appreciate it, but I have a very hard time coming up in real time with the right way to answer it. So I heard the second half of what you said, and that all resonates. I'm sure it's different for me. I have a very different musical trajectory from either you or your brother. But anyway, I will stop talking. The Wuhan Institute of Virology published on monkeypox research 3 months ago. NIH also have been researching monkeypox treatment. NTI's, I don't remember what the what that stands for. NTI's fictional monkeypox outbreak scenario start date coincides with the current one. Is all of this a coincidence?
How would we know? How would we know? There's an awful lot of coincidence these days, and it could be of very many different kinds.
There's a lot of people doing a lot of stuff. Coincidences will happen.
Will happen. There's something odd about monkeypox showing up now. I think we discussed it a little bit, given that it circulates in humans and doesn't cause these multi-continent outbreaks. What happened now? Is that downstream of any of the perfectly insane pharmaceuticals that are being thrown at COVID, these brand new mutation-inducing drugs? Don't know, but something is up here, and I guess we're going to play a guessing game where we have to figure out what the missing piece of the story is, and stay tuned.
Yeah, indeed. Oh, here we go. The assumption that you could find homozygous, with regard to the elephant question, the assumption that you'd expect to find homozygous females with no male offspring is wrong, as every female's father can't carry the gene.
Oh,
right?
True.
Obvious.
Good point.
Obvious, and we both missed it.
Yep.
Yeah, true. Yeah, so all females would be heterozygous, or homozygous for the recessive, or heterozygous.
Yep. Except for the parthenogenetic
elephants.
Well,
the FLCCC Vax injury protocol is out. I have found it helpful. Please take a look. So I saw this right before we went on.
Yep, I've looked at it.
Okay, so yeah, here it is.
Yep.
This is the post-vaccine treatment. They say first-line therapies, intermittent fasting, ivermectin, low-dose naltrexone, I think is how you pronounce that. I can make this bigger too. Melatonin, aspirin, vitamin C, vitamin D, vitamin K2, quercetin. And then now for that, that's what they've got.
Yep.
So not too far off.
So they also...
Their prevention protocol.
Yeah, it has a lot of the same elements.
Yeah.
They also have, I think there are two things on their site called iRecover. One of them is long COVID, and one of them...
Yeah, I've actually got that other one open as well.
Is vaccine injury.
Yeah, this is long COVID, and it's actually different. It's interesting. The first-line therapies is a little bit different. Ivermectin is still on there, but prednisone, naltrexone again, omega-3 fatty acids, vitamin D. Then they've got second-line therapies, which includes fluvoxamine and atorvastatin. They got a lot of stuff on here that I don't actually recognize, including like 4 different successive kinds of treatment. But of course, for long COVID, you might expect, there's just so many different amounts of time that people may be experiencing things.
Yep.
Interrupted you.
There are a number of things. There's one thing on there, iRecover from the vaccine injury protocol. There's a drug that is typically used to reduce addiction to opioids. So
What's that? I don't see that on here. You sure?
Naltrexone.
Oh, that's what that is, the naltrexone.
Yep.
Okay.
So anyway, I've inquired as to what role that is playing, but a number of the things in here are doing something that is not their primary.
Yeah. Well, but there's something around opioid receptors that one of I can't say mid. Who knows where we are in this thing? But sometime between March 2020 and now, there was some discussion of maybe opioid receptors being involved in differential response to COVID exposure, I think.
Don't remember, maybe a totally different mechanism, but we've got aspirin on this protocol. Presumably that's as an anticoagulant, not an analgesic. Mm-hmm. Melatonin is on there. Melatonin has long been understood to have some benefits in the context of COVID, and that's not, I think it's not through the mechanism of it allowing you to get more sleep.
Yeah, well, it might be related to some of the stuff we talked about a few episodes ago with regard to the benefits of sunlight that aren't vitamin D include the near infrared exposure that basically prompts this like circulating melatonin, as opposed to the form of melatonin that we think of as being on a circadian rhythm.
Yeah. I think the overarching reaction I have is you've got a tiny number of doctors who have dared to experiment and figure out what works for the patients that they're seeing. And, we have vaccine injured friends, and we've directed several of them to these tiny number of doctors who will actually treat them.
Yep.
How much better off would we be if medicine in general was trying to solve this problem. And all of these doctors could pool their knowledge and talk about things that they've noticed that work, that don't work, patterns that they've seen, right? It's insane that we would play this game this way, that we would demonize the FLCCC for daring to acknowledge that there are vaccine injuries and to daring to treat these people. So anyway, I guess what I would say is, look, we've got a tiny number of experts in this. They're the people who dared to admit that there was a problem and do the job of medicine that involves trying to figure out how to make the people's suffering less. So, more power to them.
So speaking of the FLCCC, we have another question. Andrew Huff, who we don't know, and I looked up and I will show in a minute here. Andrew Huff's tweets from the 29th suggest that he's in trouble. He's had home invasions and drones on his property. Do you know if he's safe? I don't know if that name immediately means anything to you.
It does.
It does. I figured it might. So Andrew Huff's pinned tweet, which you can show here, Zach, is you might have noticed that I've been... Oh, wait. First, though, his bio on Twitter is former EcoHealth Alliance VP and whistleblower. Army combat veteran, scientist, entrepreneur. Okay. So, thread. Last week, I decided to check my trail cameras scattered throughout my property. I noticed something very strange. The cameras that cover my driveway were all missing. A range of days from about May 8th through 15th. I found this highly suspect. Anyway, you go on, you see pictures, you see drones that aren't his on his cryptic cameras, not the ones that were. There's something there. I don't think we should do this in real time. What do you mean? Do I see them?
I mean,
he's talking this thing in this picture. So
I wasn't sure what to make of the pictures.
You've seen this already.
I have.
Okay. So anyway, this is the first time I'm looking at them. I don't know anything about it, but he's reporting that the cameras that were obvious had been offline, and the cameras that weren't obvious, that were hidden, revealed stuff going on. And he's basically saying at the end, I have nothing to hide, so I don't care if they are snooping through my activities. However, this is illegal and I have done nothing wrong. I object to the formulation of I have nothing to hide, therefore it's okay if you invade my privacy. That's not okay ever, no matter what. But there's a question of what the hell is happening and why any of us are okay with the prospect of, if there is an invasion of privacy, if it's happening.
Yeah, the problem is for all of us, I don't know what to make of this story. It's utterly extraordinary. But how would I know, right? And
yeah,
I honestly don't know how we are supposed to deal with stories like this, because if there are, in fact, drones invading his property to spy on him, having had the position, which I'm pretty sure he did at EcoHealth Alliance, and having been therefore privy to how that entity works, well, that is pretty darn interesting. On the other hand, how would we know?
Yep. Well, as always, that is the problem. All right. Next question. Last week, you talked about easy access to guns being part of the problem, yet gun murders per capita tend to be higher in blue cities with gun control and lower in red ones without. Doesn't this falsify your claim?
No. It is evidence, potentially, but you're talking about a whole suite of one-off scenarios who've had, does the fact that you're governed by Democrats mean that you have the same rules? No, it tells you something about the direction in which these rules go. But the point is, you don't have comparable entities with which to say, doesn't this mean that? No, it doesn't, none of it means anything. It could be that whatever causes people to elect Democrats is some third correlate, and it has nothing to do with...
Well, now, I don't know that this has always been the case. I hope it hasn't always been the case, but at the moment, bluer cities are more likely to have defunded the police. Right. So that's an easy correlate right there that we have to be considering.
Right. But my point is, there are 25 potentially interacting correlates. The ability to draw any simple conclusion from these patterns is dubious, but it doesn't mean that it isn't evidence, right? So It doesn't falsify, but it is evidence in a particular direction.
You can't pick two variables, put them next to each other, and say, doesn't this falsify? Because it's a complex system with a lot of interacting variables.
Right.
All right. After Bret's chat with Neil Oliver, it occurred to me that we are living a literal Stanford prison experiment based on the behavior of the elites in charge. Thoughts?
Yeah. So Neil said some things in there about the bullying and the role that it was playing, and that at the point that he saw that what came back was not an argument against his position, but a threat, that he understood where he was, because why would a threat be necessary if there was an argument that would stand in its place, which I agree with that logic.
Yeah. Why the strong arming if it's as good as you say it is?
Right. And I've used different versions of the same argument. If the argument against ivermectin's effectiveness is so compelling, why are you strong-arming my doctor and my pharmacist? Shouldn't, these people went to school to understand these things. If it really doesn't work, you should be able to show them the evidence that it doesn't work, and that should be sufficient to get it not to be prescribed and therefore not to be dispensed. So if you can't convince them...
Also, demonstrably safe from decades of work, and there was this giant stockpile that disappeared. So
right. Well, and if my doctor thinks it probably doesn't work, but it's not going to hurt you, and therefore the small, if my doctor thinks there's a 5% chance that it works and a effectively 0% chance that it's going to hurt me to try it if I'm sick with COVID, right? Why are you stopping my doctor from doing that?
Yeah.
Right. That has to do with something other than the illogic of doctors. That has to do with some reason that ivermectin must not be dispensed that we have not been told.
Indeed. If passed, I'm going to go to this one next because I think there's a misspelling here that's going to make me mispronounce the word. So I will come back to the next question in a minute. Here we go. My local Ontario data show that boosted people have double the case numbers of not fully vaxxed people. But can you point me to a more rigorous source about this trend? I haven't seen...
I've certainly seen many sources that claim this pattern.
Right.
Have not gone in depth with any of them. But it is certainly suggestive, right, that a vaccine that was initially deployed on the theory that it was going to that it was going to slow the spread of the disease now seems to be afflicting people who were vaccinated as much or more.
Yeah, but I don't have anything more rigorous than that either. So we have, I think I've just lost my ability to imagine that I can ever pronounce anything correctly in French. So I've now talked myself out of being able to do any of it. You will be familiar with the name here, Pierre Poilievre. I just don't even, I've never even heard it said because I don't get my news that way, who is running for Prime Minister in France against Trudeau. His bill...
Wait. In Canada.
Did I say France? Yeah. So, sorry, Canada, yes. Oh, God. Yeah, Trudeau is not running France. Poilievre, who, apologies for the terrible pronunciation, has introduced a bill C-278, which would, in the words of this question asker, scrap and ban vaccine mandates in Canada. He has come out strong against the vaccine mandates. I haven't been following along as much as I was back when the truckers' convoy was happening and shortly thereafter, but he has been unabashedly against the COVID tyranny that has taken over Canada. And I don't know, actually, I'm curious how that is reading in various both rural areas in Canada and cities, and how it differs between them. And that the truckers' convoy was just galvanizing. And I continue to hear regularly from people who still think on that as the sort of the one ray of hope that they've had during COVID, to see their fellow Canadians get up and stand up and link arms and say, not this, we are better than this. And I think that's what he is speaking to. He looks like a good candidate from what little I can see, but I don't know very much.
Well, the irony of the fact that it is extraordinary that he would oppose these mandates is an amazing fact in and of itself, because at this point, almost no matter where you stood with respect to the original wisdom of the vaccine campaign and the original wisdom of the vaccine mandates, what we now know about their failure to prevent the contracting and spreading of COVID-19 suggests that any normal person asked, should we be mandating that you take these things? Is their risk zero? No. Mm-hmm. Should we be mandating that you take them? Why would we? Well, it's not to control the disease. It's to keep you out of the hospital. Wait, you're mandating this to protect me from me? Am I not in a position to evaluate my own likelihood of going to the hospital based on demographic parameters that are now well understood?
Mm-hmm.
So
demographic parameters and comorbidities.
Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. So I guess my point would be, as far as I know, and I'm pretty well informed on this, there is zero argument for these mandates that I cannot even steelman an argument, because the argument is so incoherent that I can't imagine.
Yeah, and that's interesting, actually. Like, usually when asked to steelman a thing, I feel an obligation to think through what that would look like and to come up with a thing. In this case, no. I mean, this is not sophistry, but it's the same sort of like, we're going to create a thing where in order for you to respond to it the way we are telling you need to respond, you will tie yourself in circles. Like, well, the mandating of the tying in circles, actually, that's on you guys. That's not on us for saying no to mandates, because all of the evidence, 100% of the evidence, points away from their morality, frankly.
Right. No, it's completely immoral. But I guess, I have said steelmanning only applies when the position that you are steelmanning is in good faith. And I think this is a corollary of it, which is the fact that this position actually can't be steelmanned at the present. It still exists, and yet it can't be steelmanned is an indicator that this isn't really about your medical well-being. It's about something else that has not been explained. And anyway, I support this guy.
However you pronounce his name.
However, right. I mean, he can pronounce his name any way he'd like. But yes, he is
Pierre Poilievre,
bound to be better than the duplicitous Ken doll.
Man.
Yeah.
Who wouldn't?
Indeed.
Boy, that's dangerous, though. I'll bet they could come up with someone worse.
I bet they could come up with somebody equally bad.
No doubt. Are you familiar with the book The Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells? You are? Okay. I was not. This came as news to me. So the question is, no, I'm not going to tell you the question. First, I'm going to tell you the question, but first, can you say anything? So H.G. Wells. Okay.
I know that it exists. I have not read it.
Okay. It is apparently, and this is from the ever accurate Wikipedia. The Island of Dr. Moreau is an 1896 science fiction novel by H.G. Wells. Narration, it's a shipwrecked man who finds himself on the island home of Dr. Moreau, who's a mad scientist who creates human-like hybrid beings from animals via vivisection. Explores lots of philosophical themes, etc. I think that's all we need to know for the question. If you found yourself shipwrecked on the island of Dr. Moreau and he offered to enhance you with any animal trait or ability, what would it be? I would pick a monkey tail. Thanks. Oh, that's part of the question.
That's not you.
That's not me, because I will say, and this is going to seem stupidly professorial, but I imagine that what you mean when you say you'd pick a monkey tail is you'd pick one of the species of New World monkeys that have a prehensile tail, that you want to be able to both have a tail and hang from it. Almost all monkeys, not all of them, but almost all monkeys have tails, but for the most part, they're not very useful. So it's the like spider monkeys and their kin who have the prehensile tails. That's probably what you want.
Yeah, I mean, the real question is, you get to pick an animal capability.
Yeah, I don't know what to do with this one. I feel a little bit like with the music one, like, oh, I want lots of them.
It's hard to beat flight. I mean, it'd be cool to be able to to dance like a peacock spider. That'd be awesome. I think everybody would be enhanced if that capacity just existed. For any human, really. What else?
I mean, I do think some of the stuff going on in primates, where a few of the New World monkeys have these prehensile tails, and it allows them to swing in the trees in a way that is unmatched otherwise. But until you get to apes, which is to say none of the non-ape monkeys actually have full actual brachiation. They don't have full rotation here. And so apes can do this brachiation thing. That's us. Whereas not all of the New World monkeys have this fifth appendage with which they then have five things with which to kind of hang through the trees, and it allows them to be really good climbers. That all does look like a lot of fun.
It does look like fun. I think I know what I want, though.
Okay.
I want to be able to camouflage myself against a tree like Europlatus.
So Europlatus is a clade of geckos in Madagascar, the leaf-tailed geckos.
Here.
Yeah, I'm sure I have something. Okay. Oh, you want me to just do Google? I mean, I probably have one of my photos, but it's going to be older, so I'll just...
So I will tell you that the problem with these creatures is that their camouflage is really stunning, like beyond anything you can imagine. But it is almost impossible. The camera reveals them way...
So somewhere here, I actually have a great picture that you took that I used to teach with. But I'm not going to be able to pull it up, so I don't know. And I'm looking up the species that was on the island where I did most of my work, because I know that one to be particularly glorious and cryptic.
All
That's
of these
a little
pictures
bit
reveal. Imagine an animal that can. So this animal is here revealed,
He's
but
totally
imagine
revealed, yeah.
that pre-reveal, he just looks like tree bark, so that you could actually get within a foot and not realize that you're looking at a lizard that's 8 inches long.
Well, in the jungle being the slippery place that it is, like I have found myself in Madagascar sort of slipping down a slope and going to grab a tree to stabilize myself, which you can do in Madagascar, which you can't do in like the New World tropics because there's no poisonous snakes, for instance. It's the plants that'll get you, not the animals in Madagascar. This is a good one. And almost grabbing and smashing Europlatus, a leaf-tailed gecko, because I couldn't see it in advance. So that's a different species, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, but I wasn't species specific. I just want the ability to camouflage myself.
I'm just saying, I'm not sure. I don't recognize this guy, but you can see like his fingers there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it says it's from Briatis. I don't know. It's in Russian. I don't know. Yeah, I'd love to find a really cryptic one here. No, because this is what they do. As soon as you scare them up, they do this.
And even if you take a picture of one against the tree, there's something about the camera. Your eye obscures this animal in a way that a camera fails to.
Yeah, and that's really not cryptic. It looks like it's cryptic, but it's kind of really not.
That's pretty good.
It's pretty good. There's his head, eyes, hands, back, tail. His tail is sort of plated down against his feet, which are also folded back.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. I don't know if it's a him. You'd have to flip him over to look. Okay. Yeah, I'm not. I mean, I do like both the brachiation and we have brachiation though. I do like the fifth prehensile element. That's pretty good.
Mm-hmm. That is pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even the flying squirrel gliding is pretty good. I mean, if you got to choose between that and flying's cooler, but
yeah,
the flying squirrel thing's pretty good.
Yeah. It probably wouldn't be my choice, but I guess, the ability to deep dive and hold your breath for an hour, that, pinnipeds, for instance, can pull off.
So glad you don't look like an elephant seal.
Yeah, I don't want to be an elephant seal.
Yeah, no, you don't.
No.
I don't want you to be an elephant seal.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. They're nasty. Not the females so much.
No,
yeah. Okay, when did we start, Zach? What are we at? Just about exactly an hour. Okay. Let's do 2 more questions here, shall we? Why should we be careful about allowing music to be run by the markets?
Oh, because it's so powerful, right? And the thing is, the market will feed you what The market will feed you whatever it is that trivially triggers you, rather than something that is profound and deep and takes time for you to wrestle with its significance. So I think it's just the trivialization.
The markets enhance the short time horizon and the short term benefits, the short term rewards.
Yeah, and they sell you all kinds of nonsense, right? Stuff that you might want to believe, but that isn't good for you, but that because people want to believe it is resonant. So there's all kinds of stuff. Look, if you're going to take advice on mating and dating, you should take it from the Arctic monkeys and not Cardi B, right? But in terms of how likely you are to be reached by a particular message, it's the inverse.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. Yep. Okay. One more comment and then the last question. The comment, which is a suggestion, peer review process. Decentralized control of the gatekeepers via blockchain, papers or NFTs that can generate income for the scientists and the reviewers.
Yeah. On the other hand, there's a question.
There's something interesting there. I think it forgets how much additional work there is that's not the scientists and the reviewers. Like the editors are doing real work. Like there's a lot of first pass stuff, but
yeah, but I think we're just overcomplicating the problem, right?
Okay.
You want a scientific structure that rewards being right way in advance of others. Right? In other words, the degree to which something is important is partially dependent on the magnitude of the insight and partially dependent on how early it arrived. So the whole idea that we're going to gatekeep that, why are we gatekeeping? Oh, because ink and paper are expensive and we wouldn't want to waste them on stuff that wasn't true. And the point is, well, we don't use ink and paper anymore, or at least we don't need to. And so the question is, look, I want to be able to say whatever it is that I think needs to be said. And if you want to short it, good. All right, we'll see. We'll see. If you're right, cool. That's good for you. If I'm right, it's good for me. So,
and regardless of who's right, if this process works, it's good for science and it's good for the world.
Right. And isn't it good that all of the stuff, right? If I want to say something and you think it's laughable and I say it anyway and you laugh, and then 12 years down the road, 15 years down the road, it turns out I was right, then not only do you want to know that, but you also want to know, oh, wasn't that laughable? It was laughable, and yet it's true. I wonder how many other things that are laughable might be true and how I might spot them. Mm-hmm. Maybe I'll go into the business of saying laughable things that turn out to be true, right? Mm-hmm. That would be good, because if they're laughable, that means you're seeing them way ahead. Mm-hmm. So I just don't understand. We picked up a system that was literally designed to prevent us from wasting ink and paper. That's the only reason to do that level of gatekeeping. Mm-hmm. The rest of it is benefited by just doing it all out in the open. And we can afford to do that now because it's pixels. So let's do it at the pixel level. And let's, if you don't hide behind your goddamn anonymity as you say that idea is crazy. Mm-hmm. I want you to say it out loud so that when it turns out not to be crazy, then that, degrades your reputation. It should. Because if it's not really crazy, you shouldn't be saying that. And if you think it is crazy and it turned out not to be, that says something about what quality of scientist you are, right? That should all be out in the open. You should suffer the downside of getting this stuff wrong rather than being able to snuff out people's careers privately from behind some veil of anonymity. No, sorry.
Last question. Do you have evolutionary tips for weight loss? Clearly, our ancestors didn't evolve to count calories. Is it just that they were more active and ate organic? Also, fats versus carbs versus protein. That's a big question. That's a big question. And it's going to change. It changes over the lifespan. It changes. It's different for men and women. It's different. Probably there's a lineage component certainly in terms of like what foods you may be most likely to be most might be the best fit for you. There are going to be some lineage level components to that. But yeah, a lot of it's going to be about the source of the food, and the height. As Michael Pollan writes in The Omnivore's Dilemma, the vast majority of stuff that's not sold on the perimeter of supermarkets isn't real food. isn't good for you. And avoiding that, just avoiding the stuff that's not on the perimeter of a grocery market, a grocery store, if that's where you get your food, and being a lot more active will go a long way. And, you want to go farther than that, mix it up, be active in different ways, be active throughout the day. Don't do the same thing over and over again. And with regard to food, consider growing your own food. Most of us don't have that as a possibility. Grow it, buy it from people who grow it as close to you as you can, who used techniques that were as unlike the kinds of techniques that produced the food in the center of the supermarket as possible. All of that is spoken from a place of actual privilege, and many people don't have access to answers that sound like that.
So I would add a few things. One, you got to know why there's an issue, right? Your ancestors were starving, right? Almost all of them, and much of the time. Maybe they had a good season, but the point is the year is a cyclic confrontation between people and a limit on resources. So probably the solution, and I don't think we humanity know it, and I certainly don't know it, but probably the solution involves getting control of the informational architecture and sending the right information into the system so that it does not put on weight in order to get through famines that are unlikely to happen. That's one thing. Mm-hmm. I will say, personally speaking, it is very easy to break. It is very easy to bend almost any rule you would make. And that for me, the thing that works best is a rule that's so dead simple that you can't really bend it, right? Like
intermittent fasting.
Intermittent fasting, where there's an hour of the day where you don't get to eat before this hour, and then you figure out some way to make sure that what you do eat after that hour is limited, right? So that's significant. And I would also say that the tendency to put on weight with age, I believe, is an adaptation. And it's probably one that, at least as long as our food supply is consistent, has outlived its usefulness. But that understanding that the very fact of people outliving their direct capacity to reproduce, of outliving their capacity to be productive in terms of generating food, is itself interesting. That we have old people, presumably because the content of their minds has been traditionally very useful, and maybe the capacity to do certain things, like while younger people are out being productive, to mind the home front and make sure predators don't come in or something like that.
Or raise the kids.
Right, or raise the kids.
As per George Estabrook's work in the Shale Hills of Portugal, which he was a professor of ours in grad school, and we write about him in the book as well. Yeah.
So anyway, the point is, if you're wired, just as with what we discussed last week, you're badly wired with respect to what your limbs should do with your circulation when it's cold. You're also badly wired with respect to how you should view food, its abundance, its scarcity, etc. Modernity inverts the logic of some of these things, and a lot of us would be better off if it hadn't, right? Mm-hmm. But in ancestral times, it would make sense for older people to put on weight when food was abundant, so that during scarce times it was cheaper to keep them around. And if that's what we're up against, then it says something about A, to the extent that there's a solution where it's likely to be, and B, why it's an issue. It's, the willpower paradigm is no better than the chemical imbalance paradigm for mental disorders, right? It's no better than the hijacking paradigm for chemical addiction. All of these things stand in for a richer but more difficult puzzle beneath, which is the reason that we have failed to solve any of them well. We haven't confronted the full complexity of the problem yet. So I suspect it's that.
Good. A lot more to say, of course, but let's end there.
Yep.
Shall we? I forgot to say at the top of either of these hours that we're going to be coming to you early next week because someone has a plane to catch.
What?
I know. That's you.
Oh,
and
God.
Toby.
Yes.
So early and probably no Q&A, although we'll see if we can maybe do a really short one or something.
So when you say early, you're talking about
early on the same day. So it's going to be a week from today, but it will not be at noon 30 because if we start at noon 30, you'd be missing your flight.
I'd miss the flight.
Yeah,
it would be bad.
So we will be back in a week, but slightly earlier than when we usually are here. Please go take a look at our Patreons if that description of the Discord community sounded interesting to you. We encourage you to join there. And as always, we encourage you to be good to the ones you love, eat good food, and get outside.
See you next Saturday.